have a question, I'm going to just get right to it. Okay, everybody. So here is we have 3 graphics examples. We've been working on 1 a lot. 2, we use the designer for. 3, we haven't started yet. Okay. Graphics 1 yesterday, we put in quite a bit of code there that I want to try to re-explain a little bit of it today. And then we're going to add more code to make it do stuff. Because right now, if you run our example, okay, graphics 1, which was done all in code, displays an image, displays a label, displays a text box, and a button. Although you can type in the text box and you can click the button, nothing happens yet. Graphics 2 also has a label, a picture, a text box that you can type in, and a button. They also don't do anything yet. Okay? Graphics 2, we use the designer to make. So we use the beauty of the visual designer, a throwback to, for those who did the computer science 20S course. It's going to make one adjustment to attendance here. Submitting those attendances. Okay. So that's where we're at so far, but we have to actually add actions to this stuff. But I want to review kind of where we're at real quick to kind of give you a context for what we've done with this code. Okay? The frame or the form was the container that we created. And yesterday we put controls in that container by importing them from a library like the Swing library, which is what's called a lightweight control library. Okay. We encapsulated it in our class. That's when we made it private. We then instantiated those objects. We said like JLabel equals new JLabel. That's to instantiate it or create an instance of that object. We called on the constructor method. Again, this is terminology that now will make a little more sense to you, having done the classes unit. So that's what it explains here in the notes for this unit on graphics, right? We then accessed and created something called a container object. Now, one thing I didn't mention yesterday is the container object doesn't come from the Swing library. It comes from something called the AWT library. AWT stands for Abstract Windows Toolkit. You will also notice that the Swing library, there's an X here under Java, but the AWT library, there's no X. So the AWT library comes from what's called Java's core libraries. All the variables and the if statements and the loops, they come from the core library. Okay, that's how Java knows what they are. The X stands for extension libraries. So the first one you guys were exposed to was the JOptionPane extension library, which also comes from Swing, okay? But I'll just show you real quick over in our code. I can do this anywhere. I'll just do it up here. Okay. If I was to manually write import Java dot, okay, these are the core libraries built into Java, okay? So AWT is a core library. Applet, which is Java's ability to make web page based code. The IO, the input-output library. If you're going to take my IB level 40S course, we study that library. Math, like, like the calculation type stuff. There's more stuff built into the core of Java. If I add the X, these are the extension libraries, and there's quite a few, and they add more all the time, right? So there's one for cryptocurrency, there's security-based libraries, there's media-based libraries. These are all fairly complicated, and if you're a professional software developer, you might need to keep up with those. I don't have a full working understanding of all of them either. I don't know if anyone really has a full working understanding of them, but that's what happened there is we imported those libraries, okay? If you use the visual designer, you don't really have to worry too much about this stuff at that detail level because it does a lot of that stuff for you, right? It just does the imports for you. Then we use this thing called a layout manager to position stuff on our form, okay? Now, what I didn't show you is there are choices. There are other ones that you can use. We use the one just called null, which just means that we then positioned it on the form, but we don't have to use null. We could use one called border layout, which automatically lays stuff out for us. It automatically puts buttons and stuff in different places. I actually want to show you that real quick before we go any further, because that might be something you'd want to explore. So in graphics 1, when we set the controls yesterday, okay, we set the layout to null. And then we added this code to actually position it into specific X, Y, width, height positions. That's, by the way, what this set bounds method does. Set bounds, as you can see here, position something based on an X, a Y, a width, and a height. And again, you can read about that right in its documentation, right? X, the Y, the width, and the height are used to position it on the screen. But if I didn't want to do that, if I didn't want to spend the time figuring out where all the X, Y coordinates are, I could use something called the border layout. Okay? And this would need to be imported. Oh, no, I forgot how to do this. No, what am I doing wrong? Oh, it's under AWT. What's Java.awt.border layout. Okay, I'm just going to run it. It might just be a little slow catching up. Let's see. New, what's the matter there? Okay, I'm not gonna waste our time with that. I'm just gonna go back to null. I will get that working. I was gonna just try. I wasn't gonna show you, but so I guess I won't. I just didn't want to make that mistake. Okay, I'll get it fixed. Don't worry. So, anyways, when you use the border layout, it automatically positions like your labels and buttons and stuff for you, but you don't have control over it. So it's gonna place them where it can fit them. There's also one called box layout, which automatically puts them in a row, right? Like up and down. There's one called card layout. There's one called flow layout, okay? Oh, I now remember. It was this, I now remember how to do it. New border layouts. Okay. So I'm gonna show you now how it positions number 1. Okay, so there it is. The border layout has just filled the whole thing with the button. Okay. Now, if I switch border layout to flow layout, we'll take a look at how that one draws it. So here you can see with flow layout, it's flowed these things into their positions, right? So here's the button, here's the text box, pretty useless, stuff like that. So these layout managers can control where things are positioned for you if you want, but that isn't always useful to you. If you look at how the designer did it, it actually uses its own special NetBeans custom code to do that. That's what all this stuff is. It makes a group layout and then it does a bunch of code here to position it for you. So it does a bunch of custom stuff for that. Okay, which again, you don't have to worry about because the designer's taking care of it for you. But that's something, if you are interested, you can research in more detail, like these ability for Java to position stuff for you. There's even a weird one called the grid bag layout, and the grid layout, and the group layout. All of these will position stuff for you. Spring layout, and then the one we use, null, allowed us to control exactly where it goes on our own. In the notes here, I use an example with the flow layout to do it and position it that way, okay? Also, if you're looking for more notes on this stuff, In the notes, I include more information about that GUI editor, the WYSIWYG editor. There's actual notes about it that you can find there. And now obviously I'm putting these notes into this recording as well. When we get back on Monday, or if I have time tomorrow, I'm also going to show you 40S students a little more of an advanced version of this called some GUI paradigms that is another level up on this. But again, I don't want to get too far ahead here. So there's some more stuff, as you can see in the notes, on how to use that editor. All right, and that takes us to where we're going to go today. Adding action events to our design. So when you click the button, it actually does something. So first of all, let's do it with graphics 2. This is going to be obviously the easiest one to do it with because it uses the designer to do this. So from the design, if I want this button right here to actually do something, then I have to put code in it to do something. And just like Visual Studio, it's really easy. You just double click it. And if you double click it, it says right here, to do, add your code right here for the action that's performed when you click on J button 1. And I know we didn't bother naming stuff, but that's how fast it can go. So let's just make it an exit. Let's just put our code there as system.exit bracket 0. So when I click on that button of graphics 2, it will exit everything. So here's JGraphics 2, and it exits everything. So now the button actually has code associated with it. Let me add a little comment onto that. I'm going to cheat this comment. So double clicking a button, let me add, in the design mode, immediately comes to code written for you connected to that button. To add your code to execute, just like it worked in Visual Studio, okay? So if you like Visual Studio, this is perfect. You can just code a button the same way you're used to in Visual Studio. You just double click that button. Now, I'm just making these a little bigger. We're gonna get to the text box in a minute as well, so it gets code associated with it. But let's see, how do we do that in Graphics 1? Because in Graphics 1, we're doing all this. So if we go to Graphics 1, what we're going to have to do is we're going to go back up to our constructor. We set the container, we set the controls. We're going to set our actions. Okay? That's going to be a method we're going to create to set our actions. Go ahead and create the method. Jump to the method. Let me add some code to it. Comment. And now let me jump back to what I was talking about with my presentation here. How does actions actually work? I'm about to sneeze it. Excuse me. Okay, so how do actions actually work? So this is digging in a little bit deeper, right? In the Computer Science 20S course, or if you're using the editor, you don't really need to think about this, right? But the way actions work when you're coding is a lot of these programs are what are called event-driven, which means they sit there waiting for an event to happen, like you clicking a button or pressing a key or whatever. That event triggers an action, right? So that's what event-driven means. So to break that down in more detail, there are 3 parts to this. There's what's called the action listener. So you set up code that waits for an action. It's like putting a mousetrap down. You're waiting for the action to occur, okay? So it's sitting there listening to what, though? You have to assign it to something. So like with a mousetrap, you assign it to your floor, or you put the mousetrap by your toaster so that it's assigned to that particular event. What we're going to do is we're going to create an action listener and assign it to our button. So our button is connected to it. And then finally, we have to write the code that is the action itself. So, okay, I just caught a mouse, what do I do? Or in other words, I just clicked the button, what do I do? So we're going to see this in not only the notes, but we're going to put it right into our code right now. All right. All right. So we're going to now write in the set actions button here how to connect actions to our certain things. Okay. So let me start by writing up a little bit of what I just said. Action events connected to controls on our container. And our container is our user interface, right? That's what our user interface is our container frame. So our user interface, or frame, or form, right? Whatever way you want to call it, okay? And when we say controls, we also want to kind of be a little more clear about what we mean by that, right? I've been talking about that for the last few days, right? Controls can also be called components. But I mean, for example, our button is one of those. So that's what I mean. Just keep changing my comment here, right? So the action events on our thing, right, have three parts to it. Okay. One part is we set up in code and what's called an action listener. Okay. Like a mousetrap. So we build this mousetrap to listen for events. Okay. Second thing we're going to, okay, is connect that listener to an object. Okay. So in this case, we're going to connect it to the button, right? So it's like putting the trap down, right? Like you actually say, okay, I'm going to put this trap on the floor. I got the trap. Now I'm going to connect it to the floor where the mouse runs around. Okay. This is a little brutal if you like mice. And then the third thing is we write an event connected listener. Okay. So what does that mean? It means like, what do we do? So we actually have to write code defining what we actually are doing here. What do we do? Okay. All right, so that's what the action events are going to do. Okay, so let's start by creating an action listener. Okay, for the click of button. So we don't have to create this code from scratch. There are classes that we can import to do this. And there is a class called the Action Listener class, capital A, capital L. It's an action listener. For you 40S students, you'll recognize that this is actually an interface. Okay? So I'm going to just say action listener, and that should have imported it up here at the top. Notice the import comes from the AWT library, so it's part of the core of Java. All right, let's call it button listener. Equals a new. Now, if you are following along with me, or if you're following along at a later time, I'm going to show you what's about to happen, and NetBeans is going to help me out with this. I'm going to say action listener equals new action listener. When I do that, okay, bunch of code is going to get popped onto the screen. Okay, so you can see that. So the second I put those round brackets in and use Control Spacebar to let it auto-complete, a bunch of this code get put in there for me. And actually what it is it's actually a little sneaky method buried deep inside of here. So there's a lot of indenting going on here. Okay. So what I'm going to do right here is just put the line system.exit, the exact same line I had over here in the designer where I didn't have to do any of that. I just had to write that one line, okay? So obviously it's a little more complicated, okay? Let's recommend that we use NetBeans autocomplete or control base to help write code, help write this code. It really helps, okay? So there, this is our number one. We've created an action listener, okay? Believe it or not, we actually skipped ahead a little bit, and we also did number 3 here. This code for the action, we actually already wrote it in. We wrote the code that's going to happen, but we're missing number 2. Number 2, connecting it, okay, is the thing we need to do. We're going to then connect, in other words, add and connect the same thing. That listener to the control, in this case, it's the button. So here's how we do it. We say button, that's the name of our button, dot, add action listener, our button listener. Okay, so that's how number 2 works. Believe it or not, all of this code is done for you by the visual editor. And actually, if you looked in the generated code that it generates for you, you would see basically the exact same stuff, basically, okay? All right, so let's see if it works. Let's see if now, when I click on the button on graphics 1, it actually exits the program. So here's graphics 1, and I just wrote my own custom code that when I click this button, everything shuts down. All right. We were successful in adding an action to our button. But that's a common action. If you think back to the grade 10 course, that was the very first action. Like, I mean, if you think back to like the hello goodbye program, it was always coding buttons. And actually through most of the course, you were always coding buttons, coding buttons, coding buttons. But you can code things more than buttons, right? If you guys think ahead to things like video games you might want to make, you don't maybe want to have your user always just clicking on buttons all the time. You might want them, for example, if you have a game, be able to use the keyboard to move around or use the mouse to fire and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this all over again. Combine some steps, shorter code. So this is just a shortcut, essentially. We're going to do it all over again. We will create and add the action listener. And when I say add, I mean, right, like I said up there, connect. So we're going to create and connect it in one step. To the text box this time. So we're going to connect it to the text box. And we will listen for a different event. So the event we had up here was a button action listener. Just the action of clicking the button. Okay? But the event we're going to listen to here is a keyboard action. You're going to see an example of code to do this with a keyboard. We will then also do it on the editor, but here we go. Text box. Not making the listener yet. We're going to add a key listener. Key listener is what it uses to add keyboard action listening events. So add a key listener, and then right inside these round brackets, since we haven't made a key listener, let's make it. New key listener will be created And using Control Spacebar, it's once again going to put a ton of code on there. So I'm going to put that in there. Again, use autocomplete. Help write code. And I'm going to do that all over again so you guys can see that. Okay. Text box dot add KeyListener space new KeyListener, enter, Control Spacebar, and it fills in a lot of that code for me. Okay. So what are we going to do with that? A lot of this code we're not going to need. You can't, however, delete a lot of this code. You can't delete this. You can't delete that. You can't delete this. Those of you in 40S, that's because it's an interface and it's forcing you to write these. But anyways, doesn't mean I need them to take up all this space. I can sort of, you know, do this kind of stuff with it. I'm going to actually write the thing into Keypressed right here. I'm going to write a line of code here for Keypressed, but I'm not going to write something for key type or key release. Those I can get rid of. You can also, if you want, get rid of these things. These things are essentially comments. You can leave them if you'd like, but I'm going to get rid of them just to save space here. So that my KeyListener just does this. It's going to take the text, which is my label, dot set the text to be Keypressed. Okay. So whenever I press a key inside the key box, my label will say Keypressed. Let's see if this works for number 1, graphics 1. So I'm about to type a key. As I'm about to type a key, watch this. Oh, it already did it. I already typed the key. So let me do it again. Because okay, so right now it says hello world. I just typed a key and it says Keypressed. Let's be a little more specific with it. So Keypressed was, and here's the thing, there's a little parameter sitting right here that we can actually use. E.get code use. Again, I'm trying to sort of remind you of stuff if you did the grade 10 course where we also did key codes. So now as I press different keys, different key codes are going to appear up here. So that's pretty cool, right? But that was a lot of code to make that happen. How easy would that be with the editor? Well, I'll show you. To do this with the visual editor, we don't just double click our text box, because then it would be just a regular action event like the button. Instead, when you want to get into more of these custom action events, you're going to right click on it, go down to events. So right click on it, events. And now you can see a whole bunch of events, including keyboard events. So I'm going to right click, events, Keypressed. So right click, events, Keypressed. So this is how you could build a cool video game where on the frame, on the container, you could make it have these special keyboard events for moving it around. And of course I can help you with that once we get back. So anyways, Keypressed. And all I'm going to do is put the exact same line of code in there, except I have to change the name of my label to JLabel1 because I name it text in this one. And instead of E, this one called it EVT. So I'm just going to make a little bit of debugging there. And let's see if graphics 2 now also does the same thing. So in graphics 2, I'm going to type, and look at that, it's working as well. This one's working, both of them are working. When I type in the key in the text box, it's recognizing that keyboard event. Okay, so that's how that one worked. And I want to put a little comment into this one, kind of be clear about what's happening here. For other actions using the designer, right click on the object in the WYSIWYG designer, go to menu, events, and then the action you wish to add. In this case, the action was key press, right? So that's how we were able to do that. Okay, so we have two actions now happening, a button press, a keyboard press. I want to do one more that might come up in final projects, and that's a mouse event. So we're going to do this all over again. For the last time, now listening, mouse. And just like the keyboard, there's more mouse events than just clicking, right? With a mouse, it could be left click, right click, center click. Did you know there's a center button on mouses? Scroll the mouse, drag and drop. There's lots of different mouse events that can take place. So, okay, we're going to add an action listener. And it's a specific action listener. It's a mouse action listener. Okay. Specifically for mouse actions, and call. This time, what we're going to do is we're going to call an outside method. Make a little more sense when you kind of see the code in action. Okay. It's actually an actual method that we will write. We're going to write this thing. So what do I mean by that? Well, you're going to see that in a second. Okay. So we're going to attach this mouse event to the image, to the picture. Okay. So the picture will have this when the mouse and the picture are connected. Okay. So our picture is called, let me refresh our memory here. Our picture is a J label called picture. Okay, so we're going to say picture dot, okay, and we're going to add a mouse here. We could just say mouse listener. We could say mouse motion listener or mouse wheel listener. So again, if this is something you're going to do with your final project, you might have to dig a little bit deeper into exactly how this works. And of course I can help you. But we're going to use this, the middle one, the mouse motion listener. And then in here, we're going to make a new mouse motion listener. Okay, using Control Spacebar, the same method we did before. I'm going to get rid of a few of these little extra comments. And we're going to just go to where it says mouse moved. So the second the mouse moves over the picture, I want to do stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my own method called mouse moving. I don't want to call it mouse move because that method's right here. So I'm going to create my own method called mouse moving. And I'm going to give it this thing E. I'm going to pass E over to that as well. Now, yes, I could put the code right here, what I'm about to do. But this is a little more common because we're so, like the code keeps getting indented and indented and indented, that I want my own version of this. Now, yes, I can use the light bulb to create this method, but if I do that, create this method, it might actually put it in the wrong place, and I think it will. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to drop down here and write my own version of this. A private void mouse moving method that takes a mouse event called event. And once I key this in down here, no more error. So now it knows, oh, pass this over to here. You're calling this method right here. Okay. This is what I meant by we're calling an outside method that we wrote. All right. Let me comment this method. When the mouse moves over the picture, it's going to update the label with information, coordinates where the mouse is. Here's how I'm going to do it. Text dot set text mouse. And I'm going to say event dot get x. That gets the x coordinate of where the mouse is, plus, comma, plus, event. Okay, so that's going to be in GitHub so you guys can have it. But I'm just going to show you how that runs. Now this is only on graphics 1, not on graphics 2 yet. Or sorry, on graphics 2, not on on graphics 1. So this one. So the second my mouse moves over the picture, you notice up on that label, it's updating the coordinates. So up here in the corner, that's like its position, it's XY. Then down here, that's its position, it's XY. Okay? When it's not over that label, by the way, you can see the label's much bigger than you could imagine there, okay? Even though the picture's in here, okay? So spot 0. Anyways, how will we do this over on graphics 2? Well, we'll do it the same way we did the text box. Right click, events, mouse, okay? Mouse motion, mouse moved. So it's the same way. I right click, events, mouse motion, mouse moved. It's so much simpler. Events, mouse motion, mouse moved. And then it's just sitting there waiting for a line of code. I might as well just use the exact same line rather than type it. Change the name of this to JLabel1. Change the name of this to EVT, or I could maybe try changing that name, but I don't think it will let me. And now it should work for our one using the designer as well. So much easier, right? So much easier with the designer because it just takes care of the code for us, right? It just automatically does that code, okay? And again, if you were to look inside the code that NetBeans is writing, like if you look in the code that it generates, you'd see it doing basically the exact same code we just wrote, okay? It's doing the exact same code we wrote. It's just writing it for us. So here at the 30 and the 40S level, you absolutely have access to these neat designers like NetBeans and Visual Studio. But now I want you to have a deeper understanding about what's going on inside of those. Woo, okay. It is 11:41. Does anyone have any questions at this point about graphics 1 and graphics 2? They now both work and they do everything we asked them to do. I'm going to put that code up on GitHub right now. Okay. Tomorrow's goal is a lofty one. We're going to take graphics 3 and build well, I said we're going to build Photoshop. Okay. So let me remind you. We're going to use the designer in combination with custom code. So we're going to call this the hybrid approach. It's the approach I recommend. That designer is great to give you a shortcut to make some of that visual stuff happen really quickly. And we're going to make a mini version of Photoshop here. Now, I just want to wrap today by showing you from the notes that I have on this, that the exact same code or similar versions of this code is in the notes, right? So you can see here, add controls and stuff like that, add actions. Okay, it even has a little more detailed description of what's going on there, okay? To create the buttons and to create the listening and the keyboard pressing and all the stuff I talked about and put in comments in our code is in there, right? It's in there so you can see it. Okay. Since we're going to do Photoshop, I also want to get into even a few more little neat graphics things. So I just wanted to wrap today with this. Graphics and Java, there are lots of libraries you can tap into. So I'm just showing you some of them. Some of them like Swing. Let me actually pause for a second. Go to the designer here for a second. Actually, I'll go to the designer for graphics 3, for example. So in graphics 3, we could also add buttons and labels and text boxes. But there's also these other things down here that we're not looking at yet. So for example, if I go to AWT, it also has buttons and text boxes. So I could, for example, take a button from AWT and a button from Swing. So I took this button and this button, put them on my design, and they definitely have different looks to them. This is what I talked about earlier with the idea of lightweight versus heavyweight. But they're the designer, right? So I could still add my own custom code to these. Same way I did there. So we're going to kind of experiment with a little bit of both of those in this version of this. But we're also going to use some like code to draw stuff, right? So there's AWT, there's Swing. There are tons more libraries that, you know, we don't have time to get into. Like there's one called the Java 2D library. There's a Java 3D library. There's even fancier and fancier ones that they use to make programs like Minecraft with, like OpenGL, Open Graphics Library and stuff like that. These are obviously professional libraries that professional programmers tap into. But I'm just going to touch on some of these. So we're going to do some two-dimensional drawing of shapes, of painting, of filling. You can see that described there, right? Shapes and painting and filling. That's going to allow us to draw using like our Photoshop program. Okay, so there is definitely more stuff that you can tap into. So my idea with this was just to touch the surface of this stuff. Okay, so we're going to build this design with our editor. So you'll notice it has some of those radio buttons, it has labels, it has buttons. It has a bunch of stuff that we're going to build tomorrow into this design here for Graphics 3, to make Graphics 3 happen. But that's on tap for tomorrow. Okay, so on tap for tomorrow, we'll be doing a bunch of this stuff, right? So for example, we'll be adding J buttons. Okay, so if you want to get ahead of the game for tomorrow, you could put a J button onto Graphics 3. Okay, we're actually going to put 4 J buttons on there. So not 1, 4 of them, 2, 3, 4. Yes, you can do copy paste and stuff like that. Yes, it will help you line them up and stuff like that if you want. Okay, sometimes it's a bit annoying, so we'll talk about that tomorrow. So you're going to put 4 J buttons on there for tomorrow. We're also going to use this thing called the radio button. We're going to put radio buttons on there. Okay. We're going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them on there. Okay. And you're going to position them and line them up and all the rest to make our mock Photoshop program. Okay. So here in the last few minutes of the class, if you want to get ahead of the game, you can do this. I'm going to do this all over again tomorrow. And then obviously we're going to write code. I'm going to have to speed up the timeline to get done everything on time, right? But we will definitely do this. Okay? So that's all on tap for tomorrow. And then we're going to change some properties of these things and build the design and then code the design to make it a Photoshop-like program. Okay? All right. Well, everybody, that's all I have for today. I love doing these graphic stuff. I hope you guys see the potential of what it is moving forward into your final project. And you're like, oh, now I'm excited for final project. You build a design again, and you're now also armed with all this coding knowledge on methods and arrays and classes and finding ways to incorporate that into something really cool. Okay, but we're going to deal with all that on Monday, right? For this week, today and tomorrow, just still focusing on this cool graphics stuff. Okay. All right, everybody, I'm going to stop the recording now. I will